I'm going to kick off, and I'm going to ring a bell after 15 minutes. And if I haven't stopped, I'll stop. I mean, I'll have to stop to ring the bell. Yeah. No, it's all right. I can do it. I'm in control. Would you like to ring the bell?
I'll allow you.
No,
You
no,
to
it's
be in
fine.
control.
It's all right. Thank you. It's all right. I've got a timer on my phone. Oh, except that Siri isn't playing today. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to begin. Yeah, so I was asked to talk about the early days. In actual fact, I'm not going to talk very much about the finding of the property or the earliest days of the community here, because if you haven't been down yet to have a look at the video, I really recommend it. I mean, it's excellent. The three founder members who were still alive when the video was made, because obviously, sadly, Ratnashuri was no longer with us. But the other three, they're very honest and they talk very kind of compellingly, I think, about the experience of finding this place and setting it up. And there's photographs and things down there as well. So I'm not going to say very much about that. I'm going to go further back than that actually. And in fact, I'm going to stand up because then I can move and I can irritate my Tricidi by. Not that I'd went to irritate India, of course, but anyway, so I'm going to go back even further than 1985 and talk about the genesis of a women's retreat centre. And I'm going to talk about two particular things that happened before 1985, which fed into the drive to find and look for a place that could be a specifically women's retreat centre. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of memories, a fundraising. I'm going to talk a little bit about fundraising for it. And then I'm going to finish, if there's time, with a couple of little stories about Banty coming here. Okay, so first of all, if you could cast your mind back to the early 80s, those of you that were actually alive and conscious at that point in time. So I think it would either have been 81, I think probably. We used to have women's seminars at Padmaloka. So Padmaloka that's men's retreat centre in Norfolk. It hadn't very long opened. I can't remember exactly when it opened, but it might have been 79 or something like that. So the community used to move out and let women move in for a week or 10 days for a seminar with Bhante Sangharakshita. And I went on quite a few of them. Anyway, one of the ones that I went on, it must have been after I was ordained, because we used to have order meetings in the evening with Bhante Sangharakshita at the order meetings, and they were hell. The reason they were hell was because Bhante obviously was a man with a mission, and his mission was to encourage women to become more independent. So each evening when we had these meetings, he used to say things like, "Oh, the men are doing very well in Padmaloka," or "Oh, I see another X number of men are going to be ordained," and things like that. I have to confess, I didn't go, "Oh, wonderful." I kind of went, "Well, our day will come." And just to put it in context, when I was ordained in October 1980, I was the 19th woman to be ordained worldwide. Yeah, so just to put it in context. And an order weekend then held at the London Buddhist Centre would have maybe 10 women and 80 men at it. So that was the context. So in a way, I wasn't that open to being told how well they were doing. But one of the things that Banty did say, and I mean, he was prodding us a bit, but he was also interested and actually very concerned that we did get something for the women's wing, as we were at the time. And he kept saying, "You really need your own retreat centre." So that was one of the things that it kind of grew out of. I can't remember if Sangadevi was on that particular seminar, but she was certainly one of the very prominent Dharmacharinis at that time. And I don't know if she'd already decided that that was what she was going to do or if this fed into it. So that was something I think we all started thinking, oh God, yeah, we really need to get our act together here. And I remember Sangadevi wrote an article for, I can't even remember if it was Dharma Life, it was pre Dharma Life, I think. We used to have a news sheet called The Newsletter. We were really good on, publicity. And I think it was in that she wrote something about the need for women to be more independent, partly quoting things from that seminar. So that was one thing. The next thing that comes to my mind when I think about this is in 1983, we decided that all the Dharmacharinis living in the UK would go away together for a month. So the person that suggested it was somebody called Jaya Prabha, who some of you will know, and she suggested we went to Cyprus. We ended up on the island of Muck, which is off the west coast of Scotland, and it's a fabulous place. It was the perfect place, but it wasn't quite as romantic or whatever or warm as Cyprus. But anyway, we all went off. I think there were 12 of us, and that was all the Dharmacharinis active in the UK at the time. I remember Banty being rather concerned that we were all going to get on a boat together. You know that thing about how the royal family apparently don't all get in the same aeroplane. So he didn't want all the active Dharmacharis on a boat. What he didn't know was that not only did we get on the ferry, which was a big boat, but mid-sea we had to decamp from that boat onto a motorboat. And then we had to get out the motorboat into rowing boats to get onto the Isle of Muck. Muck, by the way, means the Isle of Dolphins, just in case you're thinking it means it's a dirty island. Anyway, the 12 of us spent a month together there, and it was a huge thing for us to do because we were all very active in the Buddhist centres that we were involved in. And when we said we were going to do this, it caused a riot. People were like, you can't go away for a whole month. Anyway, we did. And one of the things that we did on that was we talked about what do we need to do to get more women ordained, to help more women enter the order, as I say, given the very large disparity that there was at that point. And one of the things that we thought about was we need to have more things that are specifically for women to come to. And we had women's retreats, but we'd had them in other places. I think in the little video you see a little photograph of a place called White Row, which was a cottage on the south coast where I did all my ordination training, which was a weekend where we studied the 10 pillars, which wasn't the 10 pillars because Bante hadn't given that talk yet, but we studied the 10 precepts so that when we did get ordained, we'd be able to say Sampapalapa. We had to practice. We also studied it. It was a brilliant weekend. But anyway, so we came back from that quite fired up with the need to really sort of get something together. So they're the two episodes that I wanted to tell you about, partly because I just want you to know you're sitting in this room with, I don't know, 70 people or something. I mean, it wasn't always like that. Like even my generation, I wasn't first generation. There were only like 3 or 4 Dharmacharinis active when I came along, really, so in the UK. So I just went to rejoice in how much we've grown and how much Taraloka has played its part in that growth. And also Taraloka seeded what became Tiratnaloka. And I wanted to acknowledge that as well, because the first retreats of that era, that iteration of ordination training happened here. And there was a community that lived in Whitchurch that used to come in and do the retreats here. So again, and Sangadevi was one of those people that helped set this up and then helped set up what became Tiratnaloka. So great rejoicings and great gratitude to all of those people. A couple of little fundraising anecdotes. So in the little video, Sangadevi mentions something called Bananas, which was an outside catering business set up by Samata. Went to India. No, Karanamaya, and myself. We were mitras at the time, and it wasn't initially set up as a fundraiser for Taraloka, but it morphed into that. But I wanted to tell you one little story about you know, because these things get lost. So Samita had worked in a restaurant before. Karen and Maya had a thing. I had the only I'd worked in pubs, which was not quite the same. And anyway, we decided to take on this outside catering trip. I've got this strong memory of making hundreds of chocolate cakes that were vegan chocolate cakes that had vinegar in the recipe. That recipe's still alive and well in Sri Ratna. And I remember at one point I got distracted, how unusual, and I put way too much vinegar into the mix. I didn't realise until we sold it and we had to rush around and apologise and take it all back. And then the other thing which we did an outside catering job in the Docklands in London, and it was somebody's, a relation to an order member, was opening an art gallery. So it was quite a bohemian but quite kind of posh event. So the three of us went along with our catering stuff, and one of the things we were making was egg mayonnaise sandwiches, right? So we made the mayo. It was made with soya milk. We had big tubs of mayo that we'd made at home and carried in, and then we had the eggs separately, so they wouldn't, you know, you could just make them up as you were selling them. Karen Amaya didn't realise this, so she was just selling people mayonnaise sandwiches. And at some point we realised this. But Karen Amaya, if you know her, is the most extraordinarily ethical person you'll ever find. She has amazing integrity. So she spent an hour going round everybody with an egg. Anyway, so that was one little fundraising drive that we did. Another fundraising drive was, there were all sorts of things happened. There were cycle trips, there were cake making, there were jumbo sales, there were all sorts of things. Ratnamega, who some of you will know, and I, still Mitras at the time, or maybe I was just ordained. Anyway, we decided to hitchhike around all the centres in the UK, which were about 7 or something at that point. Anyway, we hitchhiked around them, and the last one was Glasgow. I was going home. We were going to finish in Glasgow. But we were quite tired by this point and quite narky, if I'm honest. And when we got to Glasgow, I can't even remember the details, but we had a massive row in the hall at the Buddhist Centre. And I can't even remember what it was about, but we were really yelling at each other. And Damarati came out and said, we've got a beginner's class. So would you mind going elsewhere and knocking lumps at each other? That's his exact words. So we were both very chastened and we kind of apologised and hugged and all the rest of it. And we made a load of money. It was a sponsored hitchhike. So there were two little anecdotes. I mean, I would like you to know that I can be serious too, but I thought you might enjoy some of the more amusing anecdotes. And the final thing that I want to talk about, which for me were milestones, but they're not such early milestones. Well, there's a few things that women got ordained here by women, and that was a really big step as well. That, you know, that was a start to move things from the founder, from Sangharakshita, out to be able to have a continuity. And I remember the first time that happened. Well, the first time literally was in India, and that was on behalf of Bhante. But the first time it happened where women ordained women, it was Sangadevi, Ratnashuri, and Srimala, and they'd no idea this was going to happen. They were just kind of, Bhante just told them. He'd still agreed who was going to be ordained, but they actually did the ordinations. And they were really nervous. And in a way, it was quite interesting because I don't think any of them would have been the kind of person that they're going, I'll do it, you know, in a kind of ego way at all. And I think when they were asked, they were just shocked because it was a really, really big thing, you know. And I think, you know, I have so much admiration for them that they were willing to just do it because they'd been asked to do it. And it was a massive step forward. And I remember at the time people going, oh, I don't think it should happen. I think Bhante should just keep going. I was like, he's going to die at some point, you know. If we don't have some kind of continuity plan, and succession plan will cease to exist. And Banty was actually really good at that. He was very, very good at thinking ahead in that way. So I want to just finish with him because two occasions when he came here, which I have very strong memories of because I was living here at the time. One was when he came to dedicate the Tara cabin, not the one that you've got now, but the pre whatever to that. Yeah, whatever, you know what I mean. So it was quite a bit smaller. And I remember we had about 80 people here for the opening. And I can't remember, I think you and I insisted that they could all get into the Tara cabin. That's my 15 minutes. I'll just finish quickly. Um, anyway, we managed it. We all get into the Tara cabin, and it was beautiful that Banty did this gorgeous talk about one of his teachers who'd given him the Tara practice. And I remember him talking about vegetarianism because that was when it was Chateau Dorji Rinpoche that had given him the Tara practice. And then the other time was when he came in the first international meeting that we had here, which was also under canvas. And I invited him to come along because it was the first big thing like that here. And he was like, okay, I'll come along. Maybe I could say a few words, said he. So I said, yeah, why don't you? I was giving a talk on the last morning. So I said, why don't you go in before me? He talked for an hour, something like that. And then I thought, okay, I mean, it was great. It was about the conditions for the stability of the community. So it was really good. And then he said, and thank you, now Parami's going to give a talk. And I was like, I don't think I will. People were starting to leave. It was lunchtime, you know. And he had a seat in the front. He sat down. He said, no, I've come to hear your talk. So I had to stand there and give a talk. But the reason why I wanted to finish with those two was because Banty set things in motion in a way to get somewhere for us. And then he was so delighted at how beautiful Taraloka was and how functional it was and how many people were coming through here. He was so happy. And that was one of my, really positive memories of here. So thank you. I said I'd ring a bell.